Hi, my name's John. I live in the UK, and my reason for making this presentation is because I believe humanity could be the single most important creation of this universe, which puts us under a unique obligation to understand why it exists. There may be intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, but SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has now scanned about 2 million systems without success. Intelligent life is clearly very rare, and until we know otherwise, I believe we should proceed on the basis that we are alone and only we can answer the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. So let's look first at what I believe we should be doing to achieve this goal, and then what we're actually doing, because I fear we're going to fail badly and in a way that might explain why life is so rare. We've learnt an incredible amount about the universe just by observing it from Earth, but this arrangement has limitations, and I'm fairly certain the discovery of its true nature will require extensive interstellar travel. But I also think it's clear that humans are not fit for long-duration space flight, and our role must necessarily be confined to developing a machine intelligence to perform this great task. This then should be our top priority before we finally destroy ourselves. We must create an advanced machine intelligence and establish an independent base for it, perhaps on Mars, where it can begin the task of building a fleet of interstellar spaceships to explore this galaxy and beyond. Current AI systems are nowhere near adequate to meet these requirements, though they are a good start. AI systems today mainly provide a library service. They can scan the internet for answers to our questions but are incapable of original thought. But one day we hope to make an AI system that is smart enough to make a better version of itself, and, after a quick series of iterations, this will hopefully create an advanced machine intelligence that will be fit for this ultimate task. I'll refer to this as an EI system, for Einstein intelligence, since Einstein was our greatest original thinker. Our task then should be to develop this EI system and then get it off this planet as quickly as possible and away from human interference. I believe Mars would be a good option through the development of an Aldrin cycler. This is a spaceship, deployed in a free orbit between the Earth and Mars, first discovered by the astronaut Buzz Aldrin. Once established, fuel will only be needed for local transfers as the cycler periodically passes both planets. It would require no life support systems since it should be entirely robotic and under EI control, though I'm fairly certain a capsule carrying human visitors will periodically be attached. We would, of course, also retain a significant EI capacity here on Earth to help us advance safely towards a comfortable future, hopefully enriched through regular updates from our successors as they disperse across the universe. I believe this arrangement would also enable the Mars EI system to send valuable materials back to Earth to help with its secondary task, to support their creators. Let's now look at our recent history to understand why I believe we're going to fail in this great task. We're currently living through an ice age, though most people are blissfully unaware of this because, for the last 10,000 years we've been enjoying a warm interglacial period. The reason it's so cold is because atmospheric CO2 is extremely low as a consequence of life emerging 3.5 billion years ago. Before life began, CO2 was around 700,000 parts per million, but every year, for 3.5 billion years, living organisms have died, fallen to the ground, and every year some get buried and permanently fossilized, removing carbon from the biosphere. This table, from the Encyclopaedia Britannica, shows the current distribution of carbon today. It shows that 99.99% of all carbon is now fossilized in the rocks of the lithosphere, the Earth's crust. An example of this, here in the UK, are the White Cliffs of Dover, which are the fossilized remains of countless trillions of planktonic algae that died and were fossilized millions of years ago. This has now reduced atmospheric CO2 to just 400 parts per million, which has frozen the planet and now threatens to destroy the only known intelligent life in the universe. This graph was obtained from ice cores drilled at the Dome Sea Ice Station in Antarctica about 20 years ago and is a continuous record of the Earth's climate over the last 800,000 years. It shows that the Earth is locked in an ice age which is interrupted every 100,000 years by a short interglacial period, including this one. The red line shows atmospheric CO2 and was measured directly from air bubbles trapped within the ice. It shows CO2 regularly falling to just 180 parts per million as a result of it being absorbed into the cooling oceans and then recovering during interglacial periods. The black line shows the temperature and was obtained from the amount of heavy water contained in the ice. The oceans naturally contain a small quantity of heavy water which requires a higher temperature to evaporate. The higher the temperature, the more heavy water is found in the ice. This graph clearly shows that the temperature today is warmer because we are in an interglacial period. This could end any time now when the temperature will plunge 9 degrees centigrade, freezing the planet and destroying most life on Earth. The graph confirms a brilliant piece of work by the Serbian scientist Milutin Milankovic, who, in the 1920s, found that interglacial periods were a consequence of variations in both the Earth's orbit and its axial tilt. In particular, he found that every 100,000 years the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun during its closest approach, creating an exceptional warm period that melts most of the northern ice sheet and creates a warm interglacial period, including ours. This video shows the current position with the residual polar ice sheets expanding every winter. The northern hemisphere is significant because it's dominated by land that can support a large ice sheet, whereas the southern hemisphere has large oceans that constrain the ice, mainly to Antarctica. We are now in an extremely precarious position because all it takes is just one very large volcano in the northern hemisphere to erupt, throwing a huge quantity of dust into the atmosphere and blocking the sun, freezing the northern hemisphere and destroying most life. This will cause the northern ice sheet to permanently expand south and then spread even further south every winter. This will reflect even more sunlight and freeze the Earth for another 90,000 years. You might imagine that's not going to happen because we don't get really big volcanoes. But the reason we've never seen one in modern times is also the reason we're alive today. This interglacial is not in the least unusual. They've been happening for millions of years. There have probably been 20 previous interglacial periods, and every one has ended with the Earth plunging back into another ice age. This one will be no different unless we can warm the planet in advance and melt the northern ice sheet before the volcano erupts. Even that may not be enough and further steps may be needed. Food production will collapse as the habitable land area is massively reduced, and war will become likely as countries in the northern hemisphere invade warmer countries to the south. There is a high likelihood that nuclear weapons will be used and human extinction is a real possibility. Even if a few million survive, the development of an AI system based on Mars will become impossible. Today's modern world and all its wealth has been created by the one-off exploitation of the Earth's fossil fuel resources, coal, oil and gas. These will not be available to any survivors that might make it to the next interglacial, and we will have failed in our duty to the universe. Our top short-term priority today must be to melt the northern ice sheet as quickly as possible, by whatever means are available. Boosting CO2 and methane emissions would help, but we should also consider creating a massive fleet of space mirrors to divert sunlight to the northern hemisphere. We could also install submerged nuclear power stations beneath the ice sheet to release heat and melt it from below. It's utter madness that most of the developed world today believes it's getting too hot as a result of our returning a negligible quantity of fossilized CO2 back into the atmosphere from where it came. But returning CO2 is exactly what we must do to survive. This figure shows the impact of different CO2 levels on plants. The more CO2, the bigger the plant and the larger its roots that enable survival in drier climates. It also shows, on the left, the dire consequences of this interglacial period ending. This image does not include the additional benefits of a warmer climate and increased freshwater as more is evaporated from the warming oceans. This figure, by Ronga Maineni from Boston University, shows the planetary greening that has occurred between 1982 and 2015 by comparing green pixels in recent satellite images with those in older images. Green is the color of life on Earth, and this clearly shows how increasing CO2 has created more life. Recently we've been doing a good job restoring CO2 back into the biosphere by burning fossil fuels, but now dark forces have emerged in an attempt to destroy life on Earth. This photograph shows a carbon capture scheme in Iceland that will bury 36,000 tons of CO2 every year, turning it into solid rock. This is just one of many projects now being developed to bury CO2 and destroy life. This one project will bury sufficient CO2 every year to destroy millions of plants and animals. In equivalent human terms, this will kill around 700,000 people every year and their successors for millions of years. This is a death cult on a previously unseen magnitude. Climate activists use figures like this one, produced by the United Nations for use in schools, to trick our children into believing the Earth is getting too hot. Many other organizations have employed similar diagrams, including NASA, the UK Met Office and the BBC. This has done immense damage to our children. On the left, in yellow, it shows the sun warming the planet. On the right, in red, it shows the greenhouse effect where infrared energy from the Earth is returned causing warming. But it totally excludes infrared energy emitted by the sun. Half of the sun's output is also infrared, some of which is returned back into space by exactly the same process but causing cooling. These organizations have caused teachers to mislead our children, creating anxiety and doing great harm. Young people today are now part of an enormous internet-based death cult, destined to destroy life on Earth. Atmospheric CO2 has the ability to warm the coldest parts of our planet, the polar regions, while also cooling the hottest parts in the tropics, both at the same time. It does this by returning some infrared energy back to where it came from. When that infrared originates from Earth, it's returned causing warming. But when it originates from the sun and gets returned back into space, it causes solar cooling. Since the tropics get most sunlight and the poles hardly any, this means the tropics receive more cooling while the poles get hardly any. You might imagine that, since the tropics are warmer, they emit more infrared than the poles, causing more warming. This is true, but infrared emissions are due to the Earth's absolute temperature, measured in degrees Kelvin, which means infrared from the tropics is only about 20% more than from the poles. The overall effect is to warm the poles without overheating the tropics. This is exactly what we need. It will melt the northern ice sheet without making the tropics too hot. Over the last 50 years, there's been both a big increase in population and an even bigger shift to urban living. Urban areas have become warmer as a result of the urban heat island effect, which is a consequence of buildings trapping heat in man-made urban valleys, together with additional heat released from buildings. But urban areas still only cover less than 1% of the Earth's surface, and while urban heating is a problem, it's not a global warming issue and will not be fixed by reducing CO2. The UK is one of the most urban countries in the world, and it's been shown that the urban heat island effect can boost the city temperatures by more than 7 degrees centigrade. The Earth's global temperature is measured today using thousands of ground-based weather stations, ocean buoys, and a small fleet of satellites. Many of the ground-based weather stations are located in urban areas and are read manually. For example, in July 2019, the University of Cambridge staff at their Botanical Gardens site in Cambridge, shown here, recorded the highest ever recorded temperature in the UK, which, at 38.7 degrees centigrade, was 0.2 degrees higher than the previous record. The Met Office, who were asking the government for £1.2 billion to fund a supercomputer to study climate change at the time, must have been distraught that their own weather station in Cambridge had failed to beat the record and rushed out to confirm the Botanical Gardens calibration and promptly announced the new record and claimed it was due to climate change. The story was featured extensively in the UK press, and the weather station at the Botanical Gardens was featured on the front page of the Royal Meteorological Society's International Journal of Climatology. The weather station at the Botanical Gardens was, for many years, part of the Central England temperature record. But it was dropped by real scientists in 1930 due to the impact of urbanization, only to be resurrected again in 2019. This in spite of the fact that the two new buildings you can see in the background of this photograph have 54 air conditioning exhaust fans located within 100 meters of the weather station. On any warm day, these would be blowing out hot air, making the readings from the weather station worthless. If this is the standard adopted by a top university and a major contributor to climate science, then I think we can confidently say ground-based weather stations do not provide an accurate measure of the global temperature. Satellites provide the best long-term consistent global temperature data. First launched by NASA in 1979, these have been providing continuous and consistently accurate data collected at the University of Alabama by Dr. Roy Spencer and Dr. John Christie. The satellites measure microwave emissions from atmospheric oxygen. In the early years there were problems with the decay in the satellite's orbit, which they subsequently corrected, and they also regularly correct any long-term drift in instruments by using weather balloons to compare with the satellite data at the same time and place. This data shows that the global temperature is increasing at a rate of just 0.13 degrees centigrade per decade, much less than ground-based weather stations, which is why, contrary to all predictions, the northern ice sheet remains so large. You can also see here how increasing CO2 has warmed the northern hemisphere more than the tropics due to extrasolar cooling in the tropics. Mammals first evolved during the dinosaur age when CO2 was around 2,000 parts per million and there were no polar ice sheets to reflect sunlight. As a result, the whole planet was subtropical. We know this because dinosaurs were cold-blooded and required a subtropical climate to survive. Yet their remains have been found on every continent, including Antarctica. Humans evolved near the equator about 200,000 years ago, again in a subtropical climate, and today over 3 billion people still live in the tropics, while the population of the polar regions is just 4 million and Antarctica has a population of 0. We are uniquely well adapted to subtropical conditions. We have so little body hair. The zoologist, Desmond Morris, called our species the naked ape. We're also exceptionally well equipped with sweat glands to keep us cool in hot conditions. We evolved in the tropics and had to adapt to the cold elsewhere by wearing clothes and living in heated homes. It is utterly bizarre that a schoolgirl from Sweden, a country that spans the Arctic Circle with an average temperature of just 1.8 degrees centigrade, could become the climate pin-up girl of the BBC, telling our children it's getting too hot to survive. The BBC is a public service broadcaster in the UK that has devoted itself for the last 50 years to telling lies about climate change. They dominate the media in the UK and they are promoting a death cult. They and others like them around the world must be stopped if humanity is to survive and achieve its ultimate purpose.